full-length action novel by Tom Curry, author of Writing for Custer, Captain Mesquite, etc. The masked rider battles bad men of the range in a rapid-fire campaign to save the Purple Ridges country. Chapter 1. Hills of Death. The shadows were ink-black as the Arizona moon climbed into a clear night sky. A west wind rustled the pods of mesquite and bushes, while the broad creek in the lovely valley through which wound the dirt highway reflected the beautiful silver light. "Careful now, boys. Chromo, grab his reins, but don't slice him unless he fights. Buff'll knock him out from behind. Mask up so he won't recognize us." The speaker was tall, and he wore black clothing. The white V of a ruffled shirt showed below the oval patch of his face, and his eyes glowed with a feral glint as he gave his orders. The bronze body of the man called Chromo, an Apache, was naked from Wayne Morgan and Blue Hawk except the belt up. He wore fringed buckskin pants, and his black hair was boundy by a dirty band. He looked like some murderous animal as he crouched close to the edge of the road. With him waited a bulky man with immense arms and barrel-like flanks. The steady clop-clop of a horse's hoofs told them their victim was nearing. "Don't miss now," the leader warned. "We'll get him, Blackie," the big fellow promised hoarsely. The silhouette of the rider loomed against the moon sky. Chromo and the giant, Buff Burton, were poised for the attack, and their quarry rode right into the trap, totally unaware of his peril until his Mustang snorted and shied. But Chromo had already sprung from a clump of brush in a terrific lunge. One sinewy hand snatched the reins, jerking them from the startled rider's grip. He had been slumped over his saddle horn, half asleep, and before he came fully awake, Buff Burton, from behind, jerked him from his saddle. "What the devil?" he began, but that was all he did say, and he saw nothing before he went limp as Burton hit him on the head with a short club. Buff growled, "There he is, Blackie, out cold." Blackie joined his two lieutenants, bending over the unconscious victim. Blackie's slap sent the Mustang running off. Then, as all three pulled down their masks, Blackie swore suddenly. "What's that?" he demanded. The hoofbeats of the galloping Mustang had prevented them, until then, from hearing another rider who was coming toward them at a fast clip. He was around the curve and on them before they could get out of sight. Slow-moving Buff Burton was still crouched over the quiet figure, but Chromo, snarling, had yanked out his long gleaming knife. A cowboy, in wide Stetson and leather chaps, brought his big cayuse to a sliding stop as he chanced upon the three at their robbery. "Hey, what's all this?" he bawled. The moonlight caught the sheen of his six-shooter as he whipped it from its sheath. "Robbers, huh?" His sharp eyes peered hard at them. "Why, say, you're that strong man from the medicine show in town. And that's the Apache with you, ain't it? And—" Chromo tensed for the spring, knife back, but the cowboy was some distance off, and his bullet would fly faster than a blade. But at that instant another Colt blared yellow-red death from the flank. The horseman threw up his arms, his pistol exploding harmlessly. His Mustang bucked, throwing him, and the waddy fell with his hand doubled under him in the long grass. His horse plunged down the road. Blackie Salem jumped out, in his long hand the smoking revolver with which he had dispatched the unfortunate cowboy. "Pronto now," snapped Salem. "Chromo, you run up the road and give us a call if any more snoopers come along. Buff, tote that bozo we knocked out back into the bush where we can search him without being annoyed." Coolly, Blackie ignored the murdered cowboy. killing meant nothing to him. The dead man was left where he had fallen as Buff Burton raised the small, limp fellow they had first attacked. Pushing through the dense chaparral, down toward the creek, they searched their victim. Soon, Blackie swore with satisfaction. "Got him," he chortled. "He had him, just like I figured he did." Challenge of land-grabbing desperados. He dropped something in his pocket as a nightbird gave a shrill cry from up the road. "That's Chromo," said Buff. "Somebody coming." "The blasted trail's as busy as Main Street on Saturday night," growled Blackie. He drew his gun again. "Come on, we'll sneak back and see who it is." They lay in wait by the road. Dean, the road. "Look out, Midnight," the rider in black called sharply. The great horse whirled to a stop, and the man in the black mask moved like a flash. A gun was in his hand as he hit the ground. He touched the dead man, but did not pause. His lips made a single clicking sound. Then he was back in the leather without touching stirrup iron. And the black stallion called Midnight was Wayne Morgan. Thud of heavy hoofs increased, and a big man in a black cloak, and with a large black sombrero strapped on his head, flashed around the bend. He was riding a powerful and speedy black stallion. Then they saw the black domino mask across the upper part of the man's face, the eyes gleaming through the slits. Buff Burton pulled a big Colt from inside his shirt and slowly raised it, but Salem put a hand on the giant's wrist at the moment the black mount's forehoofs nearly crunched on the corpse in the flying on around the next bend out of sight. "You should let me down, Blackie," grumbled Buff. "Hum," whispered Salem. "I guess you didn't know who he is. He's the masked rider. I've heard plenty about that bandit, and I had good reason not to gun him. Don't you see, Buff? He's on the Owl Hoot Trail, and this whole business we're in on can be blamed on him. Come on, let's not waste time. Let's get back to the show." They hurried down to the creek and crossed on some big stones, not wetting their boots above the shin. A low crackle of chaparral alarmed them for a moment, but then Chromo hissed his signal. "Señor, pronto!" called the Apache killer in a whisper. "He doubles back, and someone else comes." Hastily reaching their horses, which waited across the stream, they took to the saddle and spurred off full tilt on a narrow deer trail. "What happened, Chromo?" demanded Salem as they rode up a rocky slope into the woods. "Rider in mask creep back," said the Apache. "He ease at creek now. Try to trail us. I go slower. Hide trail. Hurry." Blackie and Buff flogged their fast horses through the narrow ridge passes, while Chromo flitted to the rear, covering trail with the skill of his race. By the time the masked rider had smelled them out, they would be out of his reach. The weird cry of a big animal sounded dimly off across the creek. "What was that?" Salem asked Buff. "Cougar, mountain lion, boss." But the howl was not that of a real mountain lion, perfect as it sounded. It was made by the masked rider who was giving his signal, calling to his loyal friend and follower, Blue Hawk, the Yaqui Indian who traveled with him across the vast reaches of the Western world. When he had come upon the dead man in the road, the masked rider had hurried on, for he guessed the assassins must be close at hand since the body was not yet cold. As soon as he was out of close range, however, he had dismounted and turned back to creep through the dark bush in an attempt to get in behind the killers. Faint sounds of their quick retreat across the purling creek told him the way they were going, but they were on their way before he could get near. The reply to the masked rider's call came from the road, and he hastened back to meet Blue Hawk, who loomed in the distance, riding a gray ghost of a horse and leading two others, a hammer-headed roan and a pinto, their regular string. In the moonlight, the masked rider showed tall, lithe, and powerful. Known by that name from the Rio Grande to Montana, he also was known as the Robin Hood Outlaw, because always he was ready to come to the aid of the oppressed, to fight in the cause of right and justice. Never was he feared by decent folk, but the hard-eyed killers against whom he turned his swift and accurate guns cursed his name and hated him. For his courage was so grim and indomitable, the speed of his colt so great, that no odds were too great for him to fight against. Many and varied were the stories circulated through the rangelands concerning the masked rider, most of them in praise of his prowess in defense of the weak, no matter if men called him outlaw. Though still young, his past was a closed book, mysterious. Not even Blue Hawk knew his real name. To Blue Hawk, he was always Señor, though there were many times that he rode in the guise of Wayne Morgan, a wandering waddy. In that role, the masked rider could circulate among people without being recognized as the famous outlaw. From his speech at times, it might be guessed that he was well-educated, although he loved the cow country lingo and made free use of it. Such was the man who rode the handsome black stallion, Midnight. Both horse and rider had become legend. Had he ever committed a crime that the law wanted him? Blue Hawk had never seen him do anything dishonest, cruel, or criminal. Tough as he was, Blue Hawk in a scrap, the masked rider had only deep sympathy for right-thinking, right-living people who might be in trouble. Fate, however, had not always dealt him kindness in return for kindness, for many times he had been accused of deeds he had never done, sworn to by bandits who sought to save themselves from retribution. Gossip and rumor helped spread such yarns. So with all hope of vindicating himself gone, the masked rider rode the danger trails, his championship of the underdog sending him into flaming battles. Along his back trail were many scores who remembered him with deep gratitude for the great help he had given them, freely, at the risk of his own life. Blue Hawk, the Yaqui, dismounted from his gray as he rode up. "What is wrong, Señor?" the Indian calmly inquired. Blue Hawk spoke without accent, for he had learned English at a mission school. But he was the characteristic Yaqui in his white shirt and white cotton drill pants, with a wide, bright-colored sash at his lean waist, where his knife gleamed. A red band kept his long black hair out of his dark eyes, and on his feet were doeskin moccasins. He was expert at taking care of himself in a fight, or under any conditions. To the masked rider, he gave a blind devotion. He would die for his friend, cheerfully, without hesitation. "I don't know what's wrong, Blue Hawk," the masked rider told him gruffly, "but I mean to find out. Look at this cowboy that somebody's killed. He was a right decent young feller, judging by his face. Ain't been robbed either. Let's see if we can trail the killers. There may be something here we ought to savvy. Bueno. Hide the hosses, and we'll try to pick up sign, but I reckon we'll have to wait till dawn." The killers went across the creek and rode off through the purple ridges. The clever Yaqui, who had the trailing ability of a panther, and the masked rider, who could follow sign with the best of them, shortcut down to the creek where the masked rider had heard the killers crossing. But it was difficult and slow, hunting marks in the chaparral and rocks at night. "Let's go back and rest up," the masked rider at last suggested. "It'll be light for long. Then we can do better, Blue Hawk." Chapter 2. Medicine Show. A WN came early, grayness breaking the sky, while white mist rolled up from Araviapa Creek. which watered the Purple Ridges country. The masked rider in Blue Hawk began casting about, then the Yaqui going into the chaparral on all fours, like a bloodhound. As the light grew, and the masked rider examined the faint tracks down by the creek, suddenly a tiny, glinting thing in softer dirt and grass took his eye. He picked it up, looking at it curiously. It was a small, sharp stone, and one side was brilliant enough to reflect the light. Hearing Blue Hawk's call, the masked rider dropped it into his pocket and hurried to his partner. Blue Hawk was kneeling by the side of an unconscious, slender little man whose head was bloody. "He is not dead, senor," reported Blue Hawk, "but knocked out." "Them robbers, of course, done that," muttered the masked rider. "3 of 'em, wasn't there?" "See, a big man, very heavy, a tall one, in a black suit, and an Apache." "Apache? How you savvy that?" Blue Hawk shrugged. "Smell him," he grunted. The masked rider nodded. "You're generally right," he said, for he knew Blue Hawk's perceptions were as keen as those of a hunting animal. The masked rider had come to trust him implicitly. A search of the pockets of the limp victim disclosed a little cash, smoking materials, odds and ends. But only a letter he found interested the masked rider. It had recently been postmarked in Chicago, Illinois, and was addressed to William Smith, General Delivery, Pinetown, Arizona. It read, in part, "Dear boy, keep moving. Don't stay too long in one place. Summers Brothers have offered $10,000 reward, and the blood money hunters are trying to trace you. It was a wonderful job. Everybody's talking of how slick you pulled it. I'll hope to join you in Tucson or Phoenix next month, but you better not write me again on account of the police. Word will always reach me through Mabel." The letter was signed Marie. "Huh," grunted the masked rider. "This feller's a thief, I reckon, Blue Hawk. He ain't so bad off either. We'll set him by the road, and somebody'll pick him up soon. As for the dead one, seems like he was a decent young feller. I'm going to trail them killers through and find out what all this is about." Getting their horses after a quick breakfast, they plunged into the chaparral across the creek and slowly followed on the trail. "Apache hide sign, very good," Blue Hawk reported after a time. Remembering that Apache, the masked rider had been turning it all over in his mind. "They're heading for Saddleville, Blue Hawk," he abruptly concluded. "3, a big one, a man in black, an Apache. Remember that medicine show we saw the other day in Pinetown?" "See, that is it, senor." "Let's ride then." The setting sun bathed the heavily bushed mountain slopes, and the ruby red of the great fireball blended with the dusty greens and browns of the undergrowth to a mauve hue which made the wild Arizona hills appear to be purple. This natural phenomenon was a pride and joy to the inhabitants of the Purple Ridges, a subsidiary range of the Galliuras, which thrust their burnt umber rugged summits to the brassy sky. It was hot and it was dry, but those hardy souls who had settled in Arizona were used to it. Aravipa Creek, a tributary of the San Pedro River, furnished water for them and their stock, running in the little vales of the Purple Ridges and over cactus-studded flats. Mesquite on the hills, however, was a nuisance since it crowded out grass on which steers could feed. Much of the thorn growth was flowering. Wands of graceful ocotillo oscillated in the soft breeze, while the yellow creosote blossoms contributed tangy odor. The town of Saddleville, nestling along the Aravipa, was small, with adobe brick or frame dwellings. It had the usual plaza around which the settlement clustered. It looked much like other such southwestern towns in the valley, where saloon keeping seemed to be the principal industry. One would be a Mexican place where tequila was sold. Another would be large, also serving as the town's meeting place. Besides its own quota of saloons, Saddleville also had a general store, a post office annex and telegraph office, a single-cell lockup, and hovels, as well as some rather attractive homes. But Saddleville was different this evening from the other valley towns. There was a stir in the plaza where usually there was only a yellow hound or so, or a sow rooting for her pig litter in the dirt. Now the plaza was occupied by a traveling medicine show. A large canvas tent was in the center. There were smaller tents, and the wagons that transported the show from town to town. A painted sign proclaimed, "Dr. Blackie Salem's Greatest Show." Smaller signs, attached to tent walls or nailed to the gay-painted wagons, were advertisements glowingly descriptive of Salem's magic elixir, the sale of which was the chief support of the show. From the main tent came the low throbbing of an Indian war drum. The afternoon performance had reached its climax, and a strident voice was urging the audience not to miss the chance of a lifetime. Ladies and gentlemen, many years ago a great Indian medicine man compounded an elixir of magic and astounding powers. This secret, now possessed by me alone, was bequeathed me by my grandfather, who saved the life of that Indian, and is now in this bottle. Think of it. For only 50 cents you can feel young again, and all your cares and illnesses will pass away. I am not here for your money, my good friends. It is to help you. It cost me more to manufacture than... In the big tent, the audience listened, some grinning, others serious, hoping what the barker said might be true. A waddy, in blue flannel shirt over broad shoulders, flapping vest with a tobacco sack tab hanging from the breast pocket, a gray Stetson straight over keen blue eyes, and good-looking, smooth, bronzed face, lean hips, and long legs encased in Levi's tucked into run-over boots, stood there listening, watching the tall Blackie Salem. Gun belts banded his slim waist. The masked rider, having trailed Salem to Saddleville, had changed to his Wayne Morgan garb and come into the town to observe the showman and his retinue. A smooth-looking rascal, sure enough, he thought. What's his game? Blackie Salem did not fool Wayne Morgan. He knew, as a rule, that these traveling medicine shows sold harmless colored water in their bottles, reaping an enormous profit from the gullible, half-sick people. Salem, however, he knew to be a highway robber as well as a slick confidence man. Blackie was 6 feet tall, but slender. He wore tight-fitting black trousers and a frock coat with a slightly soiled ruffled white shirt. His hands were long, slim, and as quick as his deep-set, ink-black eyes, and his mouth was thin-lipped. He wore a waxed black mustache clipped to a thin line and a spot goatee. Glib and adept at his spiel, Blackie Salem stampeded the crowd into buying, forcing bottles into undecided hands. His long, narrow nose twitched, and his eyes shone as he worked. Beads of sweat stood out on his olive-skinned brow and cheeks. At Blackie's right posed a tremendous creature attired in a moth-eaten leopard skin, a giant weighing over 300 pounds. His misshapen pate had been shaved to accentuate his natural ferocity, and his neck was as wide as his head. The jaw was undershot, nose mashed, underlip protruding. Small, pale blue eyes blinked stupidly at the audience, and at his sandaled feet were some of the heavy weights he had been lifting. For Buff Burton was the show's strong man, one of its leading attractions. At the back of the platform lurked a lithe, brown-skinned Apache in full war paint and feathers. The skin was tight over his high cheekbones. He had an eagle beak and steady, lusterless black eyes. Now and then he touched the war drum with his bony knuckles. But it was not on Blackie Salem, Buff Burton, or Chromo, the Apache chief, that eyes kept turning. At Salem's left posed a girl, fresh and lovely. The feminine appeal of the show, and a powerful attraction, for she sold more bottles of elixir than did all the men. Morgan agreed that she was well worth looking at, with her sheening dark curly hair and her exquisite figure in the short-skirted red dress and her dainty red slippers. Her features neared perfection. Her full red lips were smiling, and her big violet eyes, with their long dark lashes, looked steadily at the large crowd of spectators. The whole audience appreciated her, that was plain. But Wayne Morgan particularly noted how one big cowboy who stood right beside him never took his eyes off the girl. The cowboy was a handsome, good-natured giant of the Southwest. Morgan thought he must weigh over 200, and his massive, strong-muscled, broad-shouldered frame towered 3 inches over 6 feet. Coppery light hair showed under his wide Stetson, cocked jauntily on one side of his head. He had a firm chin, a good nose, and gray-green eyes the color of sagebrush. He wore leather against the thorns of the region and high black riding boots. Tiny sun wrinkles about his eyes showed how he loved to laugh. Watching him, Morgan thought, "He's fallen in love with that girl, sure enough." But aloud he said to the cowboy as he turned to him, shaking his head, "That's the saddest smile I ever saw." Chapter 3. Strike. Val Harrison, the big cowboy who had caught Wayne Morgan's eye, frowned as he turned on the man who had spoken to him. He had not known that his interest in the pretty showgirl had been noticed, and he resented having his thoughts read. However, the scowl left the face of the young range rider of the Purple Ridges as he took in the waddy beside him, a typical wandering cowhand, decent in appearance and evidently meaning no offense. "I was thinking the same myself, Waddy," Val Harrison said frankly. "That girl's smile, sure, is sad. She's mighty pretty, but she's miserable. I reckon you're right. You savvy anything about her?" The other man shrugged. "No, this is my first visit to the show. It ain't mine. I seen it at Pinetown in Valley City. What's your handle?" "Mine's Val Harrison of the Star H. It's my dad's spread. He's John Harrison." "Mine's Wayne Morgan. I ain't got a job just now, though I'm a cowhand." He paused, then said musingly, "I wonder what she's afeard of. You reckon it's that snaky herb doctor?" Val's big fist clenched. "You know, Morgan, her eyes being so scared, like a kid's, have kept me follerin' the show down the valley towns. She won't speak to a feller, and keeps to her tent when she ain't workin', though now and then she takes a stroll. If I thought that smooth dude—" He broke off, and his face reddened. "Mebbe it ain't none of my business. They say she's his niece, but she sure don't care much about him. I got savvy enough to see that. I'm going up there and buy a couple more bottles of elixir from her. I've spent 2 months' wages on the swill, then throwed it away." "You know her name?" asked Morgan. "Sure do. It's Louise Allen." Morgan followed the big Harrison as he shouldered away to the stage where Louise was selling bottles of elixir. Men were shelling out $50 for the privilege of accepting a bottle from her small white hands, with a smile thrown in. The violet eyes, Wayne Morgan noted, rose to meet Harrison's sage-colored gaze. The girl recognized him, no doubt of it, as an ardent admirer. He had been trailing the show through the valley towns, and had attempted to strike up an acquaintance, but Louise Allen would not encourage him. Pink touched her cheeks, and she dropped her long lashes as she accepted Harrison's silver dollar for 2 bottles of elixir. "I wish you'd tell me what's wrong," murmured Val, so that only Louise heard. "I ain't meaning to be fresh, but you look so worried, it hurts me." The crowd was thinning out. The amusement was over, and those who had wished to try the magic elixir had paid in their silver and retired with their bottles. As always had happened when Val Harrison had tried to talk to Louise Allen, Blackie Salem had edged over and was scowling at them. "Run along, Waddy," Salem ordered gruffly. "The lady don't want to be annoyed." "That's for her to say, not you, Salem. Keep your oar out this." Salem made a clucking sound with his thin lips, and Chromo the Apache slid near, while Buff Burton, dropping his props, which he had been gathering together, came rolling over with his grizzly bear gait, huge fists clenched, small eyes blinking. "Go on, duck," Salem snarled. "You're a nuisance, cowboy. We'll give you a fight if you want it." "Please," Louise said quickly. "Please, go away, sir. I don't want anything to do with you." "Wait, ma'am," begged Harrison. "I'm worried about you, and I can help you if you'll just say the word." She seemed to be hesitating for an instant, then Salem seized her by the wrist impatiently. "Go to your tent, Louise," he ordered. "We'll tend to this yokel." "Keep your paws off her, Salem." Young Harrison seized Salem's wrist and ripped him away from the girl. "No, stop, look out," screamed Louise, her violet eyes wide with alarm, for Chromo had whipped a knife from his sash and started in as Harrison laid hands on Blackie Salem. Buff Burton lunged too, getting a neck-breaking grip on the young Waddy. Salem struck back, slapping Val in the face as Buff Burton's great weight and strength forced Val staggering back. The Apache, like a cat on his feet, danced in. "Chromo, don't cut him," cried Louise. She tried to run in to help Val, but Salem seized her and flung her back. "Get to your tent," he shouted, beatered under his sallow skin. Harrison lashed out at the thick-necked Burton, but his fists, though well-directed and hard, seemed to have little effect. He managed to throw the strong man off, but just as he started to his feet, Chromo seized his belt and pulled him back, while Blackie Salem, snatching up a handy club, hit him a clip alongside the ear. That dazed him. The Apache and the strong man fell on him and were beating him when a level voice shouted, "Lay off that, or I'll part your scalp for you." Harrison's new acquaintance, Wayne Morgan, stood there with drawn Colt. Already Morgan had decided that Harrison's belief that the girl was terrified, living in dread of Blackie Salem, was justified. This brutal attack crystallized matters. Under the gun, Buff Burton and Chromo and Salem froze, and the steady voice, the keen blue eyes, commanded instant respect. Harrison rose, brushing off sawdust and dirt. He was used to hard knocks, but Morgan's action had saved him from a serious beating. "I'll tend to you later, Salem," he muttered. "Now, ma'am, will you talk and tell us what we can do to help you?" "No, go away," Louise said. She turned and ran from the tent, and Salem laughed harshly. "See? You've made all this fuss over nothing. We have to take care of a good many mashers like you, cowboy. As for you, mister," he scowled at Morgan, "put your gun. She told you herself to beat it." "Come on, Harrison," said Morgan. "Let's get a drink." The two Waddies hurried from the tent and retired to the Last Chance Saloon. There was a bar with a mirror over it, sawdust on the floor, tables on the side. A piano was being thumped in a corner. Harrison and Morgan sat down at a table and ordered drinks. "That's the way it goes," Val told his new friend. "I come close to having a run-in with him before. Thanks for the hand, Morgan. Don't mention it. I don't fancy that Salem hombre myself, Harrison. He's got a mean eye. I ain't licked yet, declared Harrison, but I'll have to go on home now, for my dad just sent me word my cousin Keith Harrison's body was found near the road between here and Pinetown. Somebody shot him. Wayne Morgan seemed much interested. Who done it? Do they savvy? The masked rider, Val Harrison said promptly. He was seen on the road about the time Keith was murdered. Looked like a holdup. The masked rider? Who seen him? Dunno, Harrison shrugged. I've heard tell of that fella, though. Some say he helps out folks in trouble, and they call him the Robin Hood outlaw. But he sure didn't help us out none by killing poor Keith. Keith wouldn't harm a fly. Maybe the masked rider didn't shoot him. Well, I heard Blackie Salem tell the bartender here the masked rider done it. Course he must have heard it from somebody else. In the early morning, Blackie Salem, followed by his Buff Burton and Apache Chromo, pushed through the thick ridge trails. They rode slowly, eyes on the ground, and now and then Salem would curse. "This is loco, Blackie," growled the heavy Burton, who did not take well to long trips on horseback. Chromo, out ahead, hissed a warning. Quickly they caught up with the Apache, who had stopped his rangy Mustang, which he rode with only a blanket for a saddle. "What's up, Chromo?" asked Blackie. The Apache pointed a bony finger down the vista of the deer trail they had been following. It was gorgeous country, great rock spires and ridges of varied hues sticking to the azure sky, the crowns of the mountains rusty, the lower parts clad in dusty green. There were cozy vales where ranchers lived. Feeder streams had cut deep canyons on their way to join the Aravaipa. Blackie Salem saw two cowboys in leather and Stetsons. Their horses, with reins to the ground, were near at hand. The two were squatted down, head to head, and the sunlight caught something that scintillated in the hand of one of the waddies. "What's he found?" grunted Buff Burton. Chromo had taken his rifle from its sling as the trio rode on. Near the cowboys, they dismounted and crept on afoot until some of their conversation was brought to them by the gentle west wind. "By jacks, Charlie," one cowboy was exclaiming, "I believe it is." He turned over in his fingers what he had picked up. "Sure, no doubt of it, Joe," declared the other waddy. "What you make of it, pardner?" Turn page. Pepsi-Cola is made only by Pepsi-Cola Company, Long Island City, NY. Bottled locally by authorized bottlers. I've heard tell they're picked up loose in burnout volcano country like this. Let's see, can we find more? Mum's the word, boy, till we make sure. If this leaks out, there'll be a rush, and we deserve first pick of claims, being the finders. Chromo raised his rifle to his bronze shoulder and took steady aim. But with a curse, Blackie Salem seized the barrel. "You fool, Chromo. Don't shoot." The Apache turned his shoe-black eyes on his boss. "You think," he muttered. "I do. Don't you realize what this land'll be worth once news of this strike leaks out? Why, it'll fetch a fortune per section. It will panic the nation. And you try to kill the finders. Why, you poor fool, can't you see the whole new big idea that's opening up from what we see now? It'll make us all rich." They spied on the two cowboys, who were completely engrossed in their startling strike. Charlie and Joe picked up two more of the little specimens that had excited them. Then they mounted and rode off towards Saddleville. "We've got to work fast now," said Blackie, an eager glint in his deep-set eyes. "I'll option as much of the land in this district as possible in the next few days, for the whole world's in here." "How?" asked Buff Burton. "We have enough cash to take options on the whole Purple Ridges. Ranchers own big tracts, and $100 apiece to them will cinch it legal." Then we sell claims off in small chunks and take our profits. First man to see is John Harrison, who runs the Star H. He's the biggest cowman in this neighborhood. "You savvy everything, Blackie," said Buff Burton admiringly. "We've never hit anything as big as this. Nowhere near it, boys," Blackie said jubilantly. "Win out, and we're millionaires. Fetch the horses, Chromo. We're heading for the Star H." Chapter 4. A rancher dies. ITH, such huge profits in sight, and gloating over the prospect. The three rascals, Salem, Burton, and Chromo, started down into the deep valley for the other side of the creek to the Star H. Chromo, as usual, led them. His keen nostrils widened to the breeze like a hunting animal's. It seemed that he could actually smell trouble when it lay ahead. The Apache hated most white men with an implacable and murderous lust. Only to Salem, who had been made a chief in his tribe, and Burton did he show anything that resembled friendship. Cunning, quick as a snake to strike, Chromo had killed so many of his hereditary enemies that he had lost count of his victims. Blood, once tasted by such a man, became a necessary part of life. But the Apache had to pull up and wait to see what made Blackie Salem so slow as they moved on the trails. "What you do?" Chromo asked, impatient over Blackie's loitering. Salem, immersed in his thoughts, shook his head, frowning at his aide. "Tell you later," he said. "Keep a sharp watch, Chromo. I don't want to be spotted around these parts. Maybe it'll be safer if we wait till after dark to visit Harrison's." They spent the day scouting the purple ridges, and Salem checked up on what land he must have to clean up on the Great Strike. They ate from their saddlebags and watered the horses at the creek. As the purple hues deepened on the hills, they sat their mustangs on a slope, looking down on the flat-roofed buildings of the Star H, nestling on the level land along the stream. After dark, they drew up well out from the rambling ranch house, and Salem dismounted. "Buff, with me," he ordered. "Chromo, hold the horses and keep an eye out. Don't let us be disturbed, savvy?" "Ugh," grunted Chromo, patting his long knife. Blackie Salem, with the giant Burton rolling at his heels, moved in the dark toward the front of the ranch house. A light was burning in the living room, and Blackie peeked through a window. "That's Harrison," he whispered. "He's alone. Let's go in." A tall rancher with iron-gray hair and with face reddened from sun and wind answered their knock. "Why, howdy, gents," he greeted. "Didn't hear your hosses. Sit down, sit down. Have a drink." He welcomed them with a hospitality common to the Southwest. "Thanks," Salem said. John Harrison had the same gray-green level eyes as his son Val, and there was a tinge of copper in his wiry hair. He wore a cropped mustache and had a strong mouth. "This is a business call, Harrison," Blackie said. "I'm a representative of the Eastern Beef Company, and we're adding to our range. I want to buy your ranch, and I can pay you a cash option at once. We'll pick up the property in 30 days. "Eastern Beef?" Harrison shook his head. "Never heard of 'em. We've operated only in Oregon and Washington up to now." Well, it don't make any diff, sir. I ain't thinking of selling the Star H. It's a good outfit, and it suits me." Blackie Salem had a persuasive tongue and set about talking the rancher into the sale. "Chromo, don't cut him," cried Louise, Chapter 3. "Make a price, even if you won't accept it," he urged. "We can pay well for what we want, Harrison." "But dang it, I don't want to sell." Harrison began to grow piqued as Salem would not be discouraged. His face went a shade redder. Polite as he was to a guest, Salem's insistence goaded him. Two, neither Salem's smooth exterior nor the looks of the strong man, Buff Burton, pleased him. He rose, finally, swearing. "I tell you, the ranch ain't for sale. Now get out and leave me in peace, both of you." "Wait," snapped Salem, and put his hand on Harrison's shoulder, pushing him back into his chair. "Take your paws off me," ordered the rancher angrily. Buff had come closer. "Keep still and let the boss talk," growled the strong man. "Why—" Harrison choked with rage. "In my own house, ya—" Blackie Salem's vile temper suddenly blazed. "You stubborn old goat," he snarled. "You'll sign over your land to me tonight." He saw the infuriated cowman's hand starting for his gun, which lay in its holster on the round table near the chair. With a quick jab, he struck Harrison in the face, knocking him back. The rancher cursed and jumped up, fists flailing. Buff Burton's great arms encircled Harrison. The rancher went down. His head hit hard, and the tremendous Buff fell on him. There was a sharp, sickening crack. Harrison's head had gone limp. "You fool, Buff," Salem snapped. "You've broken the old idiot's neck." Salem knelt by the rancher, whose breath was coming raspingly. "Dying?" muttered Salem. "We can't leave him like this, Buff. Go out and fetch Chromo, pronto." He jumped in alarm as the sound of a nightbird reached his ears. Chromo, warning him that someone was approaching the ranch. "Can't wait," he muttered. Pulling a knife from inside his coat, he plunged it into Harrison's jugular vein, finished him. The two killers hurried out and retreated to the shadows where Chromo held the horses ready. Mounting, they rode off, but as Salem turned and looked back, he saw someone in the light streaking from the open front door. "There's that young hombre who's been following Louise around. Harrison, why, of course. He's the son. And that waddy with him. He's the one who pulled the gun on us. Buff? Morgan, I heard his name is. Right. Fast now." They had several minutes before pursuit could be organized. Well into the hills, in the dense chaparral, their trail hidden by the cunning Chromo, they paused for a breathing spell. "I think I know how to hook young Harrison," Blackie growled. "But this is too big for us three to handle alone, boys. Chromo, Red Yeager's hiding in the Galliura's range with his gang. We saw him when we played Pinetown. Ride over and bring him to me at Saddleville. He's a pal of mine, and he's got 30 to 40 riders." Burton and Salem were back at the tent show before dawn. They slept through the morning, and then Blackie, spruced up in a fresh white shirt, shaved and washed, his dark clothes brushed, lit a black cheroot, and stepped out of his tent into the plaza sunlight. Saddleville was quietly busy. An undercurrent of eagerness could be felt, however, and Blackie chewed his cigar with ill-concealed impatience. "Strike news is beginning to spread already," he muttered. "I've got to work fast, or it's no-go, and a fortune ready to be picked up." He jumped, startled, as a whining voice at his elbow said, "Hello, Blackie. For the love of Pete, lend me a few bucks. I'm flat as an Indian's foot, and if I don't get some red-eye, I'll go crazy." Salem swung, looking down into the pale blue eyes of the slight fellow who had accosted him. "Chicago Elms, huh?" he said. "You mean to tell me you're broke again after all your talk of that big job?" "Shh," warned Chicago Elms, blinking and glancing around. "These yokel bulls have long ears." There was a ferret-like sharpness in Elms's twitching face. His lips were a thin, pale line. His nose was long and pointed, and his hair was a coarse, lusterless brown. He wore a green suit with red checks running through the pattern. He was limping, and although a brown derby was cocked on his head, it did not hide the bandage around his skull. "What did you do? Lose it gambling?" "No, no," Chicago Elms moaned and groaned. "There I was, all set for life, and I lost it." He was the picture of misery, and his bony hand shook. I got to have liquor, Blackie, to pull me through. Please. Salem drew out a roll of bills, peeled off a couple, and handed them to Elms, who was in such a hurry to reach the saloon that he galloped across the road. Blackie ran off his show without Chromo that afternoon, but his heart was not in the work. He was thinking of his great plan, and he was sitting on spikes, forced to wait for the bandit Red Jaeger before he could execute it. Chromo came in after dark, bringing Jaeger with him. Salem, who had a wide acquaintance with all the thieves and outlaws in the country, led the burly, wide-shouldered Jaeger to his private tent. Chromo stood guard at the door. "What's up, Blackie?" inquired the bandit. The notorious gunman and killer, leader of a large band of such desperados, was broad and as big around as a hogshead. For what he lacked in height, he made up for in breadth. His hair was bright red, his complexion that of a boiled lobster, and he had a flat nose and snagged teeth. Leather pants were tucked into his high riding boots with their huge silver Mexican spurs, and he wore a leather jacket and great tawny Stetson. Double gun belts were crossed on his great chest. His reddish-crimsoned eyes shone as he listened to Blackie Salem. Then he nodded and held out his stubby hand. "It's a deal. We'll start pronto, Blackie. I can put my hand on my gang any time." "Well, no time to lose," said Blackie. "The news of that strike is beginning to leak out. I can feel it." "I'll clean the whole blasted country out for Europe, Blackie," Jaeger declared, patting his guns. Death and horror had been turned loose on the purple ridges. Chapter 5. "Check. Got to act fast," he muttered. "There's a devil to pay." Soon he came upon Blue Hawk, who appeared out of the night like some ghostly visitor. Wayne Morgan, wandering Waddy, had returned to his faithful Yaqui trailmate. He had left Blue Hawk hidden outside Saddleville when he had gone into town in his cowboy disguise to check up on Blackie Salem. Blue Hawk gave him a faint smile. "Midnight wants you, senor," he said. "And I want him, pronto, Blue Hawk. Trouble in bunches has busted loose in this country. Where's our hideout? You had to shift it? See, come, I show. Men, bad men, outlaws. Come too close. They must be the ones that are worrying me. I've got my masked rider outfit right off." Morgan's face was grim. Blue Hawk knew what that meant. His friend was going to ride, guns blaring, guns that stood between the oppressed and those who sought to destroy and prey. The Yaqui led Morgan to a deep rock crevice, overgrown with heavy bush. Blue Hawk pushed a way through, and in a little hollow, where a crystal spring gushed from the rocks, stood Midnight, the masked rider's great mount. As Morgan left the lathered and thorn-scratched hammer-headed roan to be cared for by Blue Hawk, Midnight whinnied softly, nuzzling his rider's hand. "I trailed them slick hombres to their show, Blue Hawk," Morgan said. "I fooled round some with a cowboy named Harrison, or I'd been back sooner." He was discarding the Wayne Morgan garb as he spoke, and from Midnight's saddlebags extracted the masked rider's outfit. Quickly donning it, the black cloak covered his body, the domino mask his face, the black hat his head. When again he mounted the great stallion, he would once more be the Robin Hood outlaw. It did not take him long to inform Blue Hawk of all that had occurred since they had parted, and also to tell how he had learned that the killing on the road had been blamed on the masked rider. "Something deep and plenty big going on, Blue Hawk," he said grimly. "That dead cowboy we found on the trail the other night was a cousin of young Val Harrison, who's a friend of Wayne Morgan's now. We rode to his Star H ranch and found his father killed. Happened only a few minutes before we got there. His neck had been broken, and then his throat slit. We tried to trail the killers, but they hid their sign too clever. And this evening, 2 ranches along the Purple Ridges were attacked, folks shot up, and buildings burnt. I stayed with Val long as I could. He's mighty bad broke up at his dad's death. But when I heard of the raids, I slipped off and came to you. Huh. What reason this raiding, senor? I can't say yet, but it's brought a wave of terror. I heard a rumor that Red Yeager, an outlaw from the Galliuras, is running his gang through here. They gunned a sheriff this afternoon. In his black garb, the masked rider looked huge, even more than his 200 pounds, with his lean hips and wide shoulders. The cloak billowed out as he mounted Midnight, ready to go into action against the killers that had struck with such vicious, inexplicable fury against the innocent inhabitants of the Purple Ridges. Wiped out a whole family, father and 2 sons. Wounded a woman at another place when they killed the rancher, growled the masked rider. I'm going after him. Later I'll find out why they're doing it. First thing is to save these folks, Blue Hawk. I go, senor? All right, but stay out of sight. Cover my back trail. The swift black stallion, Midnight, delighted to be on the go, sprang forward with eager speed. The masked rider galloped for the trail through the Purple Ridges, his oiled 6-shooters fresh loaded and a rifle snugged under a long leg. In the sky hung a ruby haze, dimming off above in smoky clouds, and he headed toward this. The Yeager gang had struck there not long before, and he hoped to come up with them and check them before they could attack another ranch. There was no time to probe for the outlaws' motives at the moment. Swift and unerring action was called for. Brighter grew the fire as the masked rider neared it, the wind sweeping his black cloak behind him. When he saw the licking flames through the trees, he swung along a lane to the burning ranch house, but saw no attackers of this outfit, which a sign showed to be the Circle 2. Must have gone on to the next, he muttered. The red glow reflected from the sheening black's glossy hide as he pulled up the stallion. A dead man in rancher's clothing lay in the front yard, an empty 6-shooter in his hand. The heat of the fire blasted at the masked rider, and thick smoke drifted off. A woman cried out. Then the man on the black stallion saw that there were 2 of them, evidently the wife and daughter of the dead cowman. They were tending a couple of wounded cowpunchers who were stretched under a spreading oak tree on the lee side of the house. The masked rider, the woman gasped, but not in terror, for too often had stories gone abroad about how eager the masked rider always was to assist those in distress. "What's happened, ma'am?" he called. The women turned their tear-stained faces toward him. "Outlaws," the younger one told him. "They killed my father." "Which way did they go?" demanded the masked rider. "They rode toward Burns' Box. That's the nearest ranch, 5 miles up the trail to Saddleville. I heard one yell that they would attack there next." "I've got to head after 'em," the masked rider shouted. There was little he could do here now. The awful raid had been successful, and murderous guns had broken up a happy family. With teeth gritted and fighting rage in his heart, the masked rider pivoted the black stallion and sped on the outlaw's trail. Half an hour later, the masked rider heard gunfire and swerved the stallion off the dirt road toward a low-roofed homestead close to the creek bank. The brush had been cleared for some acres about the ranch, with its house, stables, and corrals. Lamps were burning in the main room, and against the light, the masked rider could see several horsemen. They were whooping it up, firing into the windows and doors. Blue-yellow flashes answered from defenders' weapons, stuck from windows and cracks of doors. The man in the mask drove in, drawing his heavy black pistols. In the hubbub, as the outlaws rode the circle, at least 30 of them, pouring slugs in at the ranchers. He was almost upon Red Yeager's gang before he was seen. "I'd like to get one crack at that Red Yeager," he muttered. He sighted a short-trunked, burly horseman who was yelling orders. As the man swung, the masked rider glimpsed brick-red hair. He threw up his Colt and let go. But just as he shot, one of Red Yeager's lieutenants pushed his horse between the masked rider and his target. The outlaw aide caught the bullet in his side. He crashed off his horse, uttering a shriek of anguish. The masked rider sighted again as Yeager's big Mustang reared and snorted in fright. Red Yeager jerked his reins hard, and his horse stood up on its hind legs, just in time to take the masked rider's lead that had been intended for the bandit chief. Yeager kicked out of the tapped stirrups, sliding to one side as his mount crumpled, and he knew by the sudden downing of his aide, the bullets that had struck his animal, that enemy guns were seeking his killers. But who was firing those guns he could not guess, having noted the position of the masked rider only by the pistol flashes. "Turn and fight, you fools!" roared Red Yeager. "They're coming in behind you!" They, it seemed to be, for the masked rider was firing with terrific speed, moving across the dark horizon. He had them against the light, and his violent, unexpected attack demoralized them. Cursing, hard-eyed men crushed against one another as they recoiled under the masked rider's fire. He tried for Yeager, but the stubby, broad chief had fallen flat behind his dead horse and was shooting over the animal. The masked rider's slugs cut the dirt and plugged into the body of the Mustang. Yeager's big hat flew off, punctured by a bullet. But the masked rider knew the man was not hit, and he regretted it. Resistance was organizing against him. He was, after all, alone against expert gunmen, hardened to gunfire and violence. They had split, each man seeking cover, a tree trunk here, a rock there, or a corral fence. The men in the house, taking new heart at the arrival of reinforcements, redoubled their fire and kept the outlaws away from the walls. "Keep moving, fast, Midnight," muttered the masked rider. Low over the magnificent stallion, he whirled through the dark fringes around the gang's position as Yeager's bullets sought his fast-shifting figure. He knew that one came within an inch of drilling his head. His cloak was perforated as it streamed behind him. Lead kissed his flesh, burning his upper arm. But he had reloaded his hot Colts and, ready for another drive, whipped Midnight around and zigzagged back and renewed his attack. An outlaw screeched, fell on his face from behind a rock near the center, a masked rider slug in his brain. Two others took burning lead, and as Red Yeager roared orders, vicious, concerted fire sought the elusive, masked rider as he fought to smash the raid on the innocent ranch folk of the Purple Ridges. The outlaws had hurried around the rear of the flat-roofed adobe ranch house after the masked rider's first furious onslaught. They had kept out of easy range of the windows and doors from which the defenders were shooting and circled far out into the dark shadows. Now they had reached their objective, the back of the masked rider, who had his hands full with the spitting gun line facing him. It was impossible to hear anything much over the roaring of the Colts and shotguns, over the steady cursing of the fighting outlaws. The masked rider, knowing that to stand still in the open for more than an instant would prove fatal, had to keep riding. At the left were several big spreading live oaks, and behind these he could pause to reload for his swift runs up and down the bandit line. He had not even seen the two had gone around the house. But now they had reached a fence which was several feet high and in its shadow were coming up, ready to shoot the masked rider in the spine as he took his short spell behind the oak trees. "Driving a hoss for me!" shrieked Red Jaeger, his bull voice carrying above the banging battle roar. Dismounted, Jaeger knew he could be picked off, for men were crawling from the ranch house with rifles. "I'll stop that," muttered the masked rider, as he saw 3 bandits spur in with a spare mount for their leader. Concentrating on the trio which sought to save Jaeger, he shot from behind the thick oak, his head close to the first gnarled limbs, his horse and body protected to a great extent by the bulk of the trees. His first bullet knocked a bandit dead from his saddle. His second dropped the Mustang ridden by another of Jaeger's killers. Intent on his task of trying to take Red Jaeger, the masked rider neither heard nor saw the 2 stealthy gunmen who had crept close up behind him. Over the fence, a rifle barrel was stuck, resting on a bar to steady it. At such close range, the killer could not miss. He held the muzzle on the masked rider with a steady hand. Chapter 6. Outlaw Way. The crack of the Winchester startled the masked rider just as he took aim at Jaeger, who was leaping up to seize the Mustang run over to him by his men. The masked rider caught the sinister whistle of the bullet over his black sombrero, and he turned his masked face to see who was upon him. Rifle, and right on me, he thought. That Winchester had been fired, but another gun had spat its message of death just an instant ahead of the bandit weapon. The masked rider glimpsed the outlaws who had sneaked up along the shadowed fence just as one of the pair threw his hands, his Winchester clattering to the ground as he collapsed. The other outlaw, Colt in hand, was drawing a bead on the masked rider. The weird wail of a mountain lion, off to the rear, told the masked rider who had saved him. His faithful comrade, Blue Hawk, had been covering his back all right. "Thanks, Blue Hawk," he muttered, as he let go with a quick revolver shot, aiming at the glint of light that caught the bandit's pistol barrel. He watched the would-be dry gulcher keel over beside his mate. Then he broke his Colt and ejected the empty shells, shoving in fresh ones. Turning back on the main outlaw gang, he urged the stallion on, picking up speed as he dashed from the live oaks, pistols blaring death and destruction to Red Jaeger's murderous killers. By now, the red-haired chief had managed to mount and was already flogging away from the scene of battle. "Come on, boy," Jaeger bellowed. "It's the masked rider. We'll get him later. Come on." The masked rider had taken fearful toll of Jaeger's men in the short moments of the red-hot battle. 5 dead outlaws lay where they had gone down. 2 were mortally wounded, groaning as they writhed to a bandit's finale on the smoking earth. Less seriously injured men had been picked up or had ridden off. Jaeger's gang spurred off into the darkness of the woods. The masked rider hurried them along with bullets, as cheering men from the house called out to him. At last, as the whole bunch disappeared into the night, the masked rider pulled up, aware that pursuit would be futile in the darkness. He swung midnight and trotted the lathered stallion, whose nostrils were flared in the excitement of the battle, back to the house. "Hey there, masked rider," a Purple Ridges rancher sang out. "Thanks a mighty. You sure saved our hides. That was Red Jaeger's big gang hitting us without warning." "Keep a sharp lookout, partner," the masked rider warned. "They're liable to be back another night." "We sure will. I'm Phil Burns, and this is The Bee in a Box. If ever I can do anything for you, let me know." "Thanks," the masked rider replied. He could see the sturdy Burns in the light from the front door, an honest, hard-working rancher. His 3 sons and 2 daughters and his wife were bunched on the veranda, peering out at the dim figure of the masked rider who had saved them from destruction. "Ya any idea what Jaeger's after?" asked the masked rider. "Why, stock, I reckon," Burns said wonderingly. "I suppose they wanted my mustangs and breed cattle, don't you?" The masked rider shrugged. Red Jaeger would hardly go to such terrific lengths in order to rustle cows and horses. He must know that all-out, wholesale attacks would finally concentrate forces upon him from which he would have to run. There must be another, and much better reason, why Jaeger had gone hog-wild all of a sudden. "Come in and have a drink," Burns invited. "We'd like to thank you right for all you've done for us." "No, I better be riding," the masked rider said. "Jaeger might decide to make another strike somewheres else. Take care of yourselves. I'll be around if you need me." He raised his gauntleted hand and, turning midnight, rode away. Blue Hawk awaited him out in the darkness. "Senor, I cover your back." "You sure did, Blue Hawk, and made a good job of it. Let's ride. I want to make sure them skunks are riding out of the Purple Ridges country." They took up the trail of the running outlaws, but evidently Red Jaeger and his merrymen had had a stomach full of fighting, for that night at least. Pausing to check the sign left by the driving hoofs of the gang's horses, the masked rider and the Yaqui found that the bandits had ridden over the high ridges into the wilds of the Arizona hinterland. "Tough men, kill all," observed Blue Hawk. "Why?" "That's up to us to find out," the masked rider said grimly, "before they do any more damage. But we can't be everywhere at once, and Jaeger has plenty of hombres riding for him." They went back to the hideout and slept until dawn. When Blue Hawk arose, he found the masked rider donning his waddy costume, assuming the guise of Wayne Morgan again. "You go?" "To Saddleville, Blue Hawk, and see if I can pick up any hints on why Jaeger's busted loose all of a sudden." He saddled the hammer-headed roan and headed for Saddleville, arriving before noon. Blackie Salem's tent show still stood in the plaza, though Morgan had thought they would be moving on. He was also surprised to find more people around than usual, and the place was buzzing with subdued excitement. Men gathered in small groups, talking together in low tones. "What's up, hombre?" Morgan inquired of a citizen. The man shrugged, returning his gaze coolly. "The sun, Waddy," he answered. Wayne Morgan let the snub go and strolled over to the Last Chance Saloon, where a large crowd was collected. Two cowboys who stood at the bar, looking pleased and triumphant, were the center of interest. "Come on, Charlie," a big fellow in jackboots, Stetson and leather pants roared, slapping the Waddy on the back. "Have another on me." "No, have one on me," insisted a townsman. "Joe, you too." "Say, I'm so full, I'll bust in a sec," the cowboy called, Charlie replied. "And if Joe throws in another, I'll have to carry him the rest of the way." "Where you going?" the cowman whined, with a smiling face and a close-clipped brown mustache. He wore an outfit similar to Charlie's. Finally, they stamped out on their bowed legs, reaching for the reins of their horses flung over the hitch rail. As they mounted, 36 other men followed suit, for horses had been ready and waiting. Charlie and Joe, obviously enjoying their importance, cantered off down the road, grinning as they glanced behind to see the train coming in their wake. Wayne Morgan went into the saloon and ordered a drink. He and the masked rider's Colt barrel landed square on Burton's skull, Chapter 12, beside Charlie asked. Charlie winked. "Just for a ride, I reckon. It's allowed, ain't it?" Sure. Charlie and Joe, Wayne Morgan saw, were run-of-the-mill waddies, the sort he was posing to be himself. Charlie was long and thin, with a weather-beaten face, a long nose, and light blue eyes. Joe was stubby and engaged the bartender in conversation, although the man kept looking out the window. "Charlie and Joe struck it rich, huh?" remarked Morgan casually, as though he knew what it was all about. For he had observed strikes in other parts of the country, and the crowd trailing the two cowboys acted like men trying to discover the location of the find. "But they're purty darn close-mouthed," growled the barkeeper. "The boys been trying to give 'em so much to drink that they'll talk, but them two are already pickled in whiskey. It just rolls off 'em like water off a duck." A glimmer of light, a tentative explanation for the behavior of Jaeger's outlaws, hit the masked rider. "Gold's mighty allurin'," he tried on the bartender. "Gold? 'Tain't gold, hombre." I thought they'd struck a vein somewheres." "Nope, bigger'n that. But they ain't saying what. All we know is they've made some sort of whopping find. Nobody seems to savvy where or what, but the rumors spread like wildfire. Charlie and Joe can't move a step without being followed." Wayne Morgan had plenty to think over now. Jaeger must savvy what them two cowboys hit on, he decided. That would explain why he's trying to wipe out the Purple Ridges ranchers. But how can Jaeger know if Charlie and Joe haven't told? This was a puzzle. The Jaeger outlaws might be trying to crush landowners, frighten them into selling their sections. But how could Red have come into the picture so quickly? "Cowboy," a high-pitched voice whined, "when I see you down that golden nectar so nonchalantly, just as if it was plain water, it's torture to me. You might as well snatch a starving babe's milk and drink it up without offering said infant even a swig. Why, it's cruelty to animals." Wayne Morgan took in the slight Chicago elms, the ferret-like face with thin, pale lip line, pointed nose and sharp ears. The green and red check suit looked as though it had been slept in, while the brown derby was dented. The pale eyes held an appeal hard to resist, and although Morgan did not fancy the ratty man's general appearance, he rang a silver dollar on the bar. Then he started, inwardly, recognizing the man. The unconscious victim of the trail whom Blue Hawk had found in the chaparral. "Thanks a million," cried Elms, licking his lips. "I'll remember you in my last will and testament." He downed the large tumbler full of red eye, which was pushed to him over the bar, smacking in pleasure. "Nothing like it for a tonic," he remarked. "You work around here, Waddy?" "I'm hunting a riding job," Morgan told him. "My name's Wayne Morgan. I can see you are a pilgrim." "Yeah, my name is Elms." He frowned and growled, "I wish I'd never come to this cursed place." His vehemence interested Morgan. "Have another," he said, "and tell me what's wrong." "Thanks." The second big tumblerful followed the first. Chicago Elms was thawing out and accepted a cigar Morgan offered. "My line is promotion, sir," he told his benefactor. "I get around a good deal and move pretty fast at times." "I bet you do," thought Morgan, figuring that this man who called himself Elms would lie to him, unless the ratty man were completely intoxicated. A thief was not likely to tell an honest person what he was up to, and Morgan had good reason to know this man was a thief. The batwing doors banged in, and Morgan sighted Blackie Salem in the bar mirror. Morgan instantly smelled trouble, especially when the giant Buff Burton, the strong man with his shaven, misshapen pate, rolled in after the showman. But to his surprise, Salem nodded to him and smiled politely. "Howdy, Morgan. Glad to see you," Salem said jovially. "No hard feelings, I hope, on account of the little fuss the other day?" "Not at all, not at all." "Hello, Chicago," Blackie went on, turning to Elms. "Drinks are on me. I was hunting for you, Chicago. Want to talk to you? Excuse us, will you, Morgan?" He ordered the bartender to bring their liquor into the back room. Taking Elms by his skinny arm, Blackie piloted the little man into one of the rear drinking rooms. Burton ambled after them, giving Morgan a scowl as he passed. Salim sure changed his tune, thought Morgan. I wonder what he's up to with this Chicago Elms, as he called him. He edged down the bar, thinking he might overhear what went on in the back room, but Blackie and Elms were gone only a few minutes when they emerged. Thanks, Blackie, Morgan heard Elms saying gratefully. That steak'll set me up. On your way, pard, Salim answered. Elms hurried past Wayne Morgan with a quick nod. Salim paused, drink in hand. Seen Val Harrison lately? He asked. I'd like to tell him how sorry I feel about that brush we had. He's welcome to come round the show any time he wants. You too, Morgan. You see, we have a lot of trouble with mashers, but we want to be friends with folks like Harrison and you. Well, doggone, he's got religion or something, mused Morgan, putting on a pleasant front to match Blackie's. First he stakes Elms, then forgives Val and me. He conked Elms that dark night for some reason too, but Elms don't know it. Blackie gave Buff Burton a signal, and the big fellow rolled over to the front window, looking out on the dusty street. Salim went on with his drink. Lots of excitement here, Blackie remarked pleasantly to Wayne Morgan. Looks like a strike of some kind. What do you figure, Morgan? I'd like to get in on it, if it's something good. Well, them two waddies, Charlie and Joe, found something, no doubt of it, said Morgan. Here they come back now, with their followers. Chapter 7. Decoy dismounting, Charlie and Joe went over to the little post office attached to the general store and entered it. When they reappeared, one carrying a small package and the other a letter, a loud cheer rang out. Go on now, Byes, ordered Joe. Me and Charlie got to read what this says, savvy? If you'd leave us alone a while, we may tell you something. Blackie Salim threw down his drink as Morgan heard Buff Burton give a grunt. I'll have to be running, Morgan, said Blackie. See you again. The tall showman hurried from the saloon, and with Buff at his heels, crossed toward his tents. Wayne Morgan strolled over to look out the wide window. Val Harrison was dismounting at the tent show. Now what? Muttered Morgan, as he saw Blackie Salim shake hands with Harrison, and as Wayne Morgan left the saloon, he heard Blackie Salim sing out, Oh, Louise, here's a friend to see you. She came out shyly, and the towering young rancher, Val Harrison, took her hand. Morgan rolled a cigarette, slouched in the shade of the building. Harrison, deeply in love with Louise, was evidently overjoyed to be able to talk to her. There was sadness in the rancher's face, though. The murder of his father had been a terrible blow to him, and he still showed the strain. But there was no doubt that Louise was a tremendous comfort to him in his grief. She kept her eyes cast down as they walked together across the plaza, nearing Morgan. Afternoon, Val, Morgan sang out. Oh, howdy, Wayne. Glad to see you. You know Miss Louise. Louise wore a plain blue dress and a ribbon bound her curly dark hair. She looked up at Morgan, and a faint smile touched her red lips. She's still mighty sad, thought Morgan. Scared to death, but she does like Val. We're going for a cup of coffee, Harrison said. And it was plain to Morgan that his new friend wanted to be alone with Louise. He wouldn't have interfered for the world. I got some things to tend to, he said. I'll see you later, Val. Chicago Elms had ridden out of town. Charlie and Joe, discoverers of the mysterious wealth which had so upset the Purple Ridges, headed off for their quarters in a log cabin on the outskirts of the town, while eager rushers gathered here and there, discussing the excitement. I need to find out what everybody's after, mused Wayne Morgan. I reckon there's one quick way to do it. Saddling the hammer-headed roan, a swift ride took him within signaling distance of Blue Hawk. Presently, the Yaqui appeared, leading Midnight. The mass rider outfit was packed in the Black Stallion's war sacks. Senor, Blue Hawk said, greeting him with the smile he reserved for his partner alone. "You fight again?" "Soon, Blue Hawk. What's that paper you got in your belt?" "East for you," replied the Yaqui. He handed the dirty sheet of paper, folded once, with 2 pinholes in it, to Morgan. Wayne Morgan scanned it quickly. The message addressed to the masked rider read, "Don't be a fool. Let's talk it over. Why should we fight each other? Meet me at the spring at the foot of the Ruby Cliff at 8 tomorrow night." Red. "Where'd you find this, Blue Hawk?" growled Morgan. "On trail near where we last see Jaeger. Pinned a bush." He added quickly, "You don't go, senor? Could be trap." "Yeah, but I figure I might learn something, Blue Hawk. However, I got plenty to do between now and then. I want you to trail me and wait for me outside Saddleville. I'll show you where, on the way. Fetch midnight." It was around 10 p.m. when Wayne Morgan returned to Saddleville. The saloons were doing a rushing business, and oil lamps gleamed yellow in the darkness. A puffy wind picked up the plaza dust and hurled it into faces. A light burning was in Louise Allen's tent, where Blackie Salem appeared, walking rapidly toward the girls' quarters. Leaving the roan, Morgan slipped quietly up behind a nearby wagon, from where he could hear what Blackie said without being seen. "Louise," called Blackie gruffly. Her face, a pale oval in the dimness, showed at the flap. "What do you want?" she demanded. "What did he say?" Salem asked eagerly. "Nothing," the girl said, and there was stubborn spirit in her voice. "You didn't even ask him then!" Fury was in Salem's tone, and he seized her wrist. Louise gave a low cry of pain. "What did I tell you?" growled Blackie. "It was your last chance, and his too. You ain't done him a favor, you little fool. I won't do it, not even if you kill me. Stop it, Blackie. Don't hurt me. I can't stand any more." "Me either," muttered Morgan, flitting around the back of the wagon. He caught Salem by the arm and ripped him away from the startled girl. "What in—" snapped Blackie, whirling, trying to reach for his gun. "No, you don't, you black-hearted snake," gritted Morgan. His powerful fist drove straight into Salem's face. The cartilage of the thin nose crunched sickeningly. Salem landed full on his spine in the dirt. His wind was knocked out, and he swore in short gasps. He knew that he needed help. "Buff Chromo," he called weakly. "Look out!" cried Louise. "Oh, please, look behind you." Just in time, Morgan heeded her warning. Chromo, the silent Apache, was almost upon him, and in the faint light, the long blade of his murderous knife glinted as he lifted it above Morgan's back. Morgan ducked, whipping his lithe body to one side, and caught the Apache's descending wrist on his forearm bone. A dangerous trick, but one which he performed with unerring precision. A booted, spurred foot rose and doubled the snaky Indian up, while he fell to the earth, propelled by the force of his own rush. Buff Burton, a piece of iron pipe in one hand, rolled up. He saw the crouched Morgan and started for him. But Morgan had whipped a gun from its holster, and the hammer spur was back under his thumb. "Stand back," he snarled, "or I'll drill you, Burton." The giant hesitated, glancing at Blackie. "Get out of here, Morgan," Salem cried. "We don't want any truck with you. Beat it." "Will you come, Louise?" Morgan inquired coolly. "No, please hurry. Go away." Wayne Morgan backed off. He picked up his horse and rode over to the biggest of the town saloons. There, he saw Val Harrison, sitting at a table in the back, having a drink. "Howdy, Morgan," sang out Harrison. He seemed cheerier than when Morgan had last seen him. "I spent the evening with Louise. She's a wonderful girl." "Yeah, she is. Did you have any truck with Salem?" "Why, not much. He asked me, casual-like, if I'd like to sell the ranch to him, But I said no, I reckon on keeping it. Isn't she pretty, Wayne? She's sweet, too. Did Louise ask you anything about selling? No, not a word. Swift thoughts raced through Morgan's keen brain. Suppose Blackie tried to get John Harrison to sell, he mused, hoping to clean up on the rush. Harrison said no, and they had a fight, and Blackie and Buff killed him. Signs all fitted to this theory. What do you suppose she'd say, Val asked, if I begged her to marry me, Wayne? Why not try it? Morgan and his big friend were sitting close to an open window which gave out on a narrow, dark side alley. I don't fancy that window, Morgan mused. Too easy for a shot to come through. Suddenly, he shifted, a hand flying to his gun, for he had heard a footstep just outside. Val? Val? Came a soft whisper. It's Louise, Harrison exclaimed, leaping up and sticking his head out the window. What's wrong? Val, please, there's no time to talk. Get your horse and leave town, and tell your friend Wayne Morgan to go too. We'll be right out, Morgan said quickly. Wait, Louise. No. But they were already started for the back exit, Morgan in the lead. The two men confronted the girl in the narrow way. Blackie's furious, she said, trembling violently. He'll kill you both. Did he say that? Growled Morgan. Val Harrison reached out his arm and gathered Louise in. She began to cry softly and let him hold her. You're going to marry me, Louise, Harrison declared. I'll protect you. Morgan glanced up at the street end of the bypass. A tall figure in black, followed by the giant Buff Burton, showed crossing the plaza, on Louise Allen's trail, without a doubt. No time to lose, Morgan said, his voice low. Take her to your ranch, Val, and see she ain't harmed. I'll tend to Salem and his pards. Harrison agreed enthusiastically. My aunt's there, Louise, and she'll help you. You can't stay with them dogs any longer. In her eyes shone sudden, wild hope, the hope of escape from her unbearable life. But then she shook her head. It will mean your death, Val. You don't know Blackie the way I do. He's vicious, a killer. What's he up to now, Louise? Morgan asked. What's he after here? I don't know, for sure. He told me I was to make Val sell the ranch to him. He's a terrible man. And Chromo and Buff do anything he tells them to. Please go now. There they come. A shrill whistle sounded from Tin Can Alley, and Wayne Morgan realized that the Apache had them cut off at the other end of the passage and was calling Salem. Blackie and Buff, both armed, turned toward the alley. Hustle, urged Morgan. There's hosses down the line, Val. Take Louise to the Star H pronto. And you? Asked Harrison. I'll be all right. Do what I say now. There's no time to lose. Harrison scooped Louise up in his big arms. She clung to him as he carried her swiftly in Morgan's wake. Chromo lurked close at hand at that end of the alley, and Buff Burton and Salem were starting through from the street.